Okay, so if you have more, so the first one is actually a visual. I missed that. So the first one should be visual. If you have more A's, stand up. Who has more A's? Visual. Stand up. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, look around. Those are your other visual teachers. Okay. All
I'm
right.
really close with tactile.
Okay. All right. That's okay. All right. Go ahead and sit down. What about if you have more B's? Stand up. B's. You guys are the auditory learners in the room. Yeah. All right, go ahead and sit down. If you have more C's, tactile. If you have more C's,
That's good.
is there anybody that had an equal number of their top 2?
Well, mine was pretty close.
Okay.
Visual was 7 and auditory was 8.
Okay, yeah, so that's super close. Anybody else that had
Exactly.
a 7 and 8 for
I
you?
was visual and tactile, like those are 2 different.
Okay, all right. And when I did this quiz like many years ago, it was like 20 years ago, 24, I did have an even split between visual and auditory and I had no tactile. I'm like, oh my gosh, no wonder. I just like to fit and learn to be faster. But what I did this little quick quiz for is just to get us thinking about the different ways that people learn. So when we are putting together a lesson, we have this, wonderful lesson book of all sorts of things that we have that are related to the different parts of our session that we're teaching. And we have lots of different ideas. And as a teacher, it's super easy to take a look at those and be like, oh, you know what? This works really well. This works really well. Like this works really well. And sometimes what we don't think about is that we're, as a teacher, thinking about what works well for us. But the way that we learn might not be the way that everybody in our class learns the best. So as we go through our lesson planning, we are going to pay attention to what things are going to work better for a visual learner, what things are going to work better for an auditory learner, what things are going to work better for a tactile learner, so that as we do our planning, we know we have different things in there that are going to work well for those different categories of kids that we have. So I did pass out to you a little pages 3 and 4 that go along with this, and that is the learning style explanations. And we're not actually going to go through this right now, but I want you to have it so that you can look at it, because it is really helpful to see what kind of things are going to work well for a visual learner. They're gonna want to see something. If they see it, they're gonna remember it better. And then an auditory learner, they need to hear it. So maybe they're not gonna pay attention to what you're showing, but if they're listening, that's what is gonna be the most helpful for them. And then our tactile learners, if they are doing something, they're gonna absorb it better. And so we want to make sure that we have a good mix of those things as we're doing our planning. And then another thing that I get asked sometimes is like, oh, like how do you keep everybody's attention? Or like if it gets a little crazy in there, what do you do to kind of bring everybody back? And one thing that I feel is like super helpful in answering those questions is actually planning for your transitions. So as you are going from one thing to another in your list of activities that you're doing, how do you help your kids go from one thing or even like one place in the room to another place without it getting all haywire and crazy? And so sometimes if we just think through a little bit, okay, I'm gonna have them go from the tables, but I'm gonna have this next activity over here in the area without the tables for our big kids, all right? What can we do to move them from one place to another without them all going crazy? So I might have them do a certain motion to get over to the circle that we're gonna make on the floor. Or I might tell them, I wanna see, we're gonna make a circle with our chairs today. I wanna see the chair, see if you can do it without making any noise. See if you can carry it so quietly that not even a mouse would be suspected, and move it over to our chairs. Okay, let's see how well we can do it. and I'm gonna be looking to see if the girls do it quieter or the boys do it quicker. And so little things like that give them an opportunity to be like, oh, you know, some of them are going to like jump on board because it's competition and they want to beat the boys or they want to beat the girls. Some of them are going to be like, I know how to do this, and they want to show it off. You have different kids doing, you know, things for different reasons, but you have a better transition because you gave them something to do while they were transitioning. So, that's a little, just like as we're planning our lessons, if we kind of think ahead for little tiny things like that that are not, you know, your lesson plan is not hanging on that, but it just helps you as a teacher to not have to regain the classroom control because of a switch from one thing to another. So, we're not gonna go through this, but you have it there to take a look at on as you're doing your next lesson planning. You can look through that beforehand. I did put together when I'm teaching, and I'm using our little our big lesson book. I love to have something with me that I can just like carry around from whatever we're doing when it's little, and it will help me keep on track and not forget what is next. Because I don't want to be tied to the book. If I'm like constantly like flipping in the pages and like having to look back and forth, like there's so much in the book that I don't want to have to be tied to it to know what's coming next. How am I going to, remember with everything that's going on in the room and all the kids that I'm trying to keep engaged, and eye contact is super good for that. Like if I'm trying to find, the next thing that's important in my book, it's really hard. So what I do when I'm doing my planning is I might make just a little card like this, and it is our schedule, and it's just like bullet format, but it gives me something to just have in front of me that I can quick look at and like easily I can see intro, and then I can see like my different activities and what I'm doing, where I'm going. So what I did today is I put together a framework, a blank framework for everybody that you guys get to take home. So that one is a blank one. But I also put together a framework from one of our lessons in our book. And because just for the sake of time, I want you to have to like write down everything. But I did put some categories, and these would kind of correspond with what my bullet points are in my little card. And then I put here a time, and on my little card, I do often, this one doesn't have it, but I do often have like a little like estimate of how much time it's gonna take. And I put that on there just so that as I'm teaching, if something took a little bit longer and I need to cut something out, I can look and see, okay, what is 5 minutes? Okay, we're gonna shorten that to 1 minute. And okay, over here, that's 5 minutes. I'm just gonna take that one out. We don't need to do that one today. So I can adjust as I am going with how my classroom flow is going, and also, oh my gosh, I hear the music already. How is that possible? They got out early today. So I went back and looked at our sermon series on Spotify and looked at like how many minutes our sermons usually are. Usually it's about 55 minutes. It goes between 55 and 60 quite often, but then like there was one week where it was only 45 minutes. So there is a range. So what I do when I'm doing my planning is I do my planning so that I have about 65 minutes of activities. And then some things might go super fast, and that's fine. Then we'll have time for everything. And then some things might be a little bit longer and I have to cut something out. It's always better to have more than you need and be able to cut out something that you prepared than to come to it and say, oh my gosh, we still have 10 minutes left in the service and I have no idea what to do. Okay, let's play hangman, which, okay, that's fine. You can do that. That's not a problem. But it is just more comfortable as a teacher to feel like you're doing something that you prepared and you know what you're doing and you're not having to make up something extra at the end, right? So I am gonna pass these out to everybody, and we have also, I copied one of our lessons, the one that this is based on. So I just made a copy for every 2 people. So if you guys want to pass those around and kind of share with someone. I think there is enough. Who still needs one? Here?
Remember how different the elementary and preschool are? Are they kind of similar?
So for the preschool, your lesson is way easier because you're letting the kids
Yeah.
replay right in the beginning. All right. So you guys, we're gonna go through the elementary planning process. The preschool one is way easy, and as we get to different things, I'll kind of do pullouts for okay if you're
Okay.
preschool, okay if you're elementary. But okay, this is I should have passed these out at the same time. These are for take one and pass them down. These are our little planning.
Is this one person?
One per person. One per person. Yeah.
Yes.
I know. These are what we're missing. I have some.
Yeah, there we go.
Right. Alright, so when we come in for our when we are taking a look at our session, I being visual, like I had to make sure that our page was on there, our title page was on there and everything. We don't really need that for right now. But we do have on the second page, we have a little teacher study for us. And so you guys have all served in children's ministry, I'm sure you've seen it. But if you when you bring that bin home and bring it inside, you know, at your house Sunday afternoon or Monday, you know, at some point just read and prepare your heart. Because the more that our heart is prepared, the better that we are equipped for God to use us to bring these truths to the kids that we're going to be in contact with. So that is we have a leader Bible study in there. And then the next page is the gather supplies page. And that's also great to look at, even if you're not going to do your full lesson planning at the beginning of the week, great to look at that because it gives you at a glance what kind of things you might need as you are preparing for this week. And so if there is something unusual that you wouldn't normally be bringing to church or you wouldn't normally have in your house, then you can call around and be like, hey, do you have this? I don't have this. Do you have it? You know, find somebody that has kids that age that might have that item or give me a call if you're stuck or give Angie a call if you're stuck or Liz. But that will just give you a little heads up ahead of time. So as we get into our welcome time, we have our welcome time as our first thing here. And oh, I have my lesson framework here. So we have our welcome time. And when we are welcoming our kids, oftentimes, because our kids are coming in at different times, for our little kids, they're gonna come right in and they're gonna play and they're gonna get settled and get their tears calmed down and hopefully find their person if they're, you know, a little bit clingy still. And so our little kids are playing during that time, and that's kind of a good transition for them because they've been sitting for a little bit with response and the service. So for our big kids, they come in and they're wanting to talk and visit, and sometimes what I will do is have their activity page out on the table and have them work on it, and they can work on it together. This particular activity page, I was gonna have our bin here, but Robert and Rosie pray for Robert. His grandma, they found out yesterday that she's not doing well. So that is where they are today. But I was gonna show us our nice little visual. This one is a nice little seek and find page. All right. So that one I would let them do together and, you know, have time to, okay, who found what? Was this easy or was this hard to find some of these things? And then that would be what type of learning style? Visual. So there you go. We have our visual learners who immediately like want to, I want to see that. And some of our other learners too are going to be interested in it. It's not that it's going to be boring for everybody else, but And then after we have everybody, the service has, gotten started again and we have our kids have stopped trickling in, everybody's there, is when I will get everyone's attention. All right, I'm so happy to have you here today. Thank you guys so much for coming. Maybe somebody's birthday, maybe, whatever little touches you have that you want to talk about with your group. And we have such a small group, comparatively speaking to some big churches. So we have the opportunity to really get to know our kids, which is awesome. But then we want to make sure that we start off with our classroom rules. And so for our little ones, this one is a real big one because this is where they get those rules really ingrained into their heads. And so we have little motions that go along with it, and we have a little kind of like a chant. And I think this is from way back when Carson was in the elementary school class. That his mom passed this along to me, and we got all of our teachers doing it. And now, as we've had so many different new teachers come in the last 5 years, I don't know if we actually have gone through this lately with any of our preschool teachers. So here is how it goes. This is to learn our classroom rules, all right? So our first rule is be quiet when someone is talking. And so we put our finger in front of our mouth. Shh. And the little kids especially, they love doing the shush part, right? Shh. Be quiet when someone is talking. And then our next rule is raise your hand if you have something to say. So we shoot our hands up. And when you're doing this with not the elementary kids, but with the little kids class, you really want to get those motions, get them into the motions and get them excited about it. And if you act like you're excited, they think it's exciting. So act like you're excited about it, even if it's oh my gosh, we are doing this again. No, it's okay. All right. So we have shh, be quiet when someone is talking. Raise your hand if you have something to say. And then we have don't touch the friend who is sitting beside you. Okay, what does touching mean? Yes, it means to, poke them. It means to, pull on their clothes. But also, it means you can't be giving them a hug while we're doing our lesson time. Right now is not the time for that. Or nobody is going to go around tickling the person next to them, okay? All right, so you just make it kind of fun and silly with them, but don't touch the friend who is sitting beside you. And then we put our hand behind our ear. Listen to our teachers, be kind as we play. And these are our classroom rules, hooray! And so
they're in there.
They are in, yeah, so when you guys get your bins and you have your classroom materials, those rules are in one of the folders in the pouch. And there is actually a song that Liz posted a long time ago, I think maybe 2 years ago, to Slack. So it's disappeared because Slack only stays in there for 30 days or 90 days because we had the free version. So I can get with Liz to repost the link to that. I don't think we used the actual song very much. I always did it as a chant. But the kids, once they get on board with having that, knowing that those rules and those actions, then they are able to just remember them. The kids that are big kids now were little kids when we first started Cross Up Grace, and they all went through we did this every Sunday, we did the motions every Sunday, and so now with my big kids, I'm all right, you know what, you guys, we don't have to go through the whole chant because you guys know it so well. All right, who can remind me? What's our first rule? And then somebody will say the first rule. Okay, what's our second rule? Okay, somebody will say the second rule. So I just go through it really quickly with them. I don't make them do the whole thing like we did with the younger kids because they don't need that anymore. They just need a quick refresher and a quick reminder. But it is really good to set the tone for I have these expectations and you know these expectations, and any visitor that comes in gets to hear what the expectations are. Okay, so now we've done that. We've gone past, we can keep going. And it just gives such a good reminder to the class that we always have the same expectations and we know what's happening during our class period. So welcome and rules. What would that be? What do you guys think? Between visual, auditory, and I'm always gonna say kinesthetic, but tactile is what we have here. Tactile.
It's all three.
It's all three.
It's all three. It's all three because we're saying them, and then we have motions that we're doing, so that's tactile. But you're also seeing the motion, so it's also visual. So that one covers all three. All right, for our session starter, it's gonna be something different every week, right? So in this particular lesson, we have a couple of options for our session starter, right? All right, here's what I want you to do. I want you to take a look at this option and turn to the 2 or 3 people that you are sitting with and decide which of these 2 session starters would you do. And then, and why, but also what would the learning style be for the one that you picked, all right? So we have 2, we have mirror, mirror, which is acting, and we have completely unique, which is drawing. For our learners who might be listening here, I will read them just because they will read them, but you guys can talk among yourselves, that's totally fine, okay? All right, so for our first session starter, we have mirror, mirror, ask the kids to form pairs. Each pair will stand facing each other. One kid will begin to make movements and the other must attempt to mimic the movements as though a reflection on the mirror. After a few minutes, instructs the kids to switch roles so each kid has a chance to lead and to mimic. All right, and then it gives you some information to say after you have finished with the activity. When you stand in front of a mirror, it reflects back to you exactly what you look like. Today, we'll talk about the ways that God is holy and how we can reflect God's holiness into the world. We aren't perfect mirrors of God, but we can show the world that He's like. And the other option is completely unique. Before the session, use a bold black marker to make some simple squiggles on a sheet of paper. Make sure that none of the squiggles are alike. Prepare 1 sheet per kid. During the session, give each kid one of the squiggle sheets. Challenge the kids to look at their squiggles and incorporate it into a unique drawing. Provide the kids with markers, crayons, or colored pencils to draw and include their art. Just as the squiggles were unique, you use them to make unique artwork. God is completely unique too. God is not like anything or anyone else. Nothing in creation can match His beauty, power, or goodness. This is part of what it means to say God is holy. He is set apart. We can be holy and set apart too. Today, we will learn more about how He set apart. All right, so did you figure out what would you guys plan? Which one of those would you plan? We're going to go around really quickly and just say which you would plan and why.
Number 1, because I don't like.
All right, so Emily would plan number 1 because she doesn't like number 2. That's fine. So mirror, mirror. She's a mirror, mirror. Okay. Jennifer. Mirror, mirror, mirror. Jake.
I don't know, I couldn't decide.
You can decide. So you like them both, and it might just depend on how much time you had to prep. Which that is a good point. Like some of these take more prep than others, and if you have a little more time and it's something that you'd like to do, awesome, do it. And then if you are a little bit pressed for time that week and you have lots going on and you don't have the time to actually prep something that it would require, then go with the other one. All right, what about you, Kaylee? Which one would you do?
We chose for similar reasons to what you just said. I admitted that I'm not the best prepper.
Okay, so mirror,
But
mirror.
I want to get better.
Mirror, mirror didn't take any prep.
Yeah.
It just takes giving an opportunity
Yeah, it looks
for
fun.
your kids,
It looks fun.
and it will be fun. What about you, Debbie?
Mirror, mirror.
Danielle?
Same.
Same. Angie, what about you? All right. What about you, Megan? The drawing one. All right. And why would you pick the drawing one? Okay. All right. Yep. So that's another reason too. It seems more calm. All right, Jason, what about you?
I went to the restroom.
Mirror, mirror.
Yeah.
All right. Manny,
Same, because it just seems more fun, I guess.
mirror, mirror. It seems a lot of fun. Okay.
I picked it because because when I was in geometry, even though I like drawing, I never remembered the drawing things. I always remembered the interactions.
Ah, interesting. That's great. Great logic behind it. Okay. Anna,
Mirror, mirror, just more fun.
more fun. All right.
Same. Oh, crazy.
I liked completely
Yeah.
unique.
completely unique.
Dude,
All right.
I chose that one too.
And that's
because
what you
it's
chose
more fun.
And you know what? I was looking at them and I was like, okay, Mirror Mirror is really easy, but I would choose this Simply Unique one because like I have played a very similar game with my kids and they loved it and it was so fun. So anyway, I think either one of those are great options. There's no bad answer, and that's why I wanted us to tell each other a little bit, like, why would you do that? That's because everybody is going to have a different opinion on what they would like to do better, and a different reason. So what do you think about the learning styles between Mirror Mirror and Completely Unique? What would you put for the learning style? Mirror Mirror, what would that be? Tactile. You're up and you're moving and you're into it. It could be visual too, but I would have put it as tactile. And then what about Completely Unique? Definitely visual, right? And then as you close out the activity, don't forget to give a little connection between what they just did, which was fun, and that's the part that they were like, when are we gonna do the game? When are we gonna do the activity? Okay, that's what they love, but don't forget to draw the connection between that and what the lesson is for the day. So the teacher's manual does have some really great little like say this lines, and you don't have to, read it from the book. You don't have to memorize it, but whichever activity you're doing, like read it enough so that you kind of internalize it and you don't forget about how to draw that connection between what they just did and what we're going to be studying about in our lesson. All right, so the next thing in our little framework is going to be our big picture question. And so that one is on the next page under Introduce the Story. And we have our big picture question always is in the bin. So for our kids in elementary, they are readers or growing into readers soon, hopefully. And so we have it as a paper, and one paper is the question and one paper is the answer. All right, for our smaller kids, I think you guys do also have a printout of the big picture questions and answers. And for you guys, I mean, obviously those little ones are not usually reading quite yet. And so it's more for you to have something to look at, and reading is like it's modeling, right? So even though they can't actually read it, even just having it out is still okay. Like it's modeling, like, oh, this is something important. This is another way that we get to use reading when we know how to do it. So we have our big picture answer and question, and a lot of times I will take the little board that we have has two sides, right? And there's magnets. So a lot of times, like, I will take a magnet and I'll put the question on one side with the magnets and on the other side the answer, so that I can like flip it back and forth. Here's our big picture question. Now look where you are in the unit, okay? So this is from our unit 6, and it's our session 4. All right, so your session number is going to tell you how many times the kids have already had this big picture question, and same thing with the memories. So if we're on session 4, they've already had it for 3 times. So this is going to be a question that they've already heard and they probably know the answer to. And so in this case, I would show them the, I might even like not show it to them and ask them, hey, who remembers what our big picture question was? You guys have been talking about this for 3 weeks, so does anybody remember what it is before I show you? And then they can have a chance. Now, obviously it's week 1, you're not going to do that because they don't know the question. All right, here's our new big picture question. Would be week 1, right? And so you're going to show them the new big picture question, and then and okay, so who has the answer since this is week 4? And we have some kids in there that are so fast with memorizing and are just like ready to spit out the answer. And that, like, we're happy. Like, sometimes as teachers, it's like, he's always going to know what it is, and he's just going to say it and no one else gets a chance. But actually, like, something like this, we're actually happy to see that they have internalized that they know it. So this is a part of the lesson where it's great, and you can encourage them, like, awesome, like, I'm so proud of you, like, you are really great at memorizing these. Let's help everybody to remember it and then turn around to the answer. And everybody can read it together and then cover up the answer and see if they can do it again. Those kind of things are like pretty just easy and almost the same every week, just based where you are in your lesson. But would that be auditory, visual, or tactile? Yeah, visual and auditory. Yeah, it's not really tactile. They're not really touching anything with that one. All right, so the next thing is just a minute of review questions. When we have our review the timeline spot in there, we don't have a timeline, so we're not like some classrooms that are dedicated have the timeline all across the wall. We don't have that, so we're not actually pointing to it. But you can look back in your book and say, what did they learn about last week? Okay, for our particular lesson, last week, session 3, God healed the Israelites from the snake bites. And then the week before, Moses disobeyed God. And the week before that, the people didn't enter the land. So but I don't like make a long process out of the review. But all right, what have you guys learned lately? And they will tell me an answer. And I just have it in here so that I know, okay, what was the story? And oh yeah, that was one of the answers, right? And then we have always the time that they are super excited about, snack time, right? So snack time goes with story time usually when I'm teaching. You're welcome to do it differently. I know for the little kids that works really well too, is like, okay, we're gonna have our story time now. And so for our young ones, when you are getting them to that point of doing the story and the big picture question goes with that too, right? Then you are, okay, let's have everybody clean up. And when you are cleaning up, I mean, kids love music, right? So I would just start singing with them. All right, clean up, everybody, everywhere, clean up, everybody do your share. And I don't know how it is, like all little kids know that song, right? So if we continue to sing it every week, then it like just kind of gives them that that auditory clue in their routine, like, oh, this is what happens now. And we just clean and sing the whole time we're cleaning, and it gets done quickly, and we get all the toys put away, and then we can sit and have our story time and pass out our snack. So of course we want to make sure that we are praying for our snack, and always, like, there seems to be in the elementary kid, there's always somebody that is gonna volunteer, like, can I pray? With the little ones, you can ask if somebody wants to pray. There might not always be someone that is comfortable with that, but then sometimes there are. Some of our little ones are, growing up into bigger ones, and they're ready to do that too. So giving them that opportunity is great. Karen.
I had a question about the prayer time. Something I noticed in the elementary class is that all the kids hold the. Is that something that should be actively discouraging?
That is interesting.
I don't have that. And then we accidentally prayed a long time. They all
I
started
didn't know
dying.
they were gonna do that.
And they're like, we always hold our breath.
Yeah, I don't know, is anything, like, I don't know, I've never. Don't let him pull that one over on you. Yeah.
Impressive.
Last time training, it was a long time. I was expensive.
So discourage that.
So you don't have to encourage or discourage. Like, I feel like that's the kind of thing you just kind of like, oh, wow. That's they'll forget about it in a week or two.
After one kid passes out, then they'll be like, oh, okay, it's serious.
So yeah, for story time, they have snack, and it kind of sometimes helps too, because as we have kids that are tactile learners, like, they actually absorb better if they have something to do. So like if they're eating, like the chewing motion, it helps with the back and forth in the brain. And so it's actually like a scientific thing that sometimes if you're chewing, it helps you to think. So I know one student who she has ADD, like a diagnosis, and her doctor like wrote a note, this child should be chewing gum at school because it will help her to be able to think. So there's another reason for the snack and the story to go together. It works well. And then as far as like passing out refills, like sometimes our kids are like, okay, can I have a refill? Like right in the middle of the story. And usually like the kids have had breakfast. They're not coming here starving. Like this is not their lunchtime. Like this is just to hold you over until you go home and have lunch. You're fine. You don't need a refill. But every once in a while you can see like there's a kid who's actually like, oh my gosh, I'm so hungry. I'm starving. Like maybe they were already talking about how hungry they are. Like if you kind of feel like there's maybe a little bit of a unusual situation and you want to give out a refill, I would have your helper do it. So whoever is like teaching is not interrupted from, you know, the story, but
Glad you bring it up. Could be a good thing to discuss because I know at least the big kids will always kind of compare what they get with different, you know, oh, I got that much with that teacher, you know. So it could be a good thing to be on the same page with everyone.
with
But,
everyone.
yeah, I mean, I don't know, just unless it's a big deal, but but they will remember. You know,
Yeah.
sometimes they're like, oh, 3 cups on Tuesday.
Yeah. So definitely never 3 cups. They don't need that much. This is just to hold them over. It's not supposed to be a full meal. So if you don't have to feel bad about, oh, we're not doing refills today. So yeah, that's fine. But as we are planning out our story, oftentimes I will actually take my Bible and turn to wherever we're teaching from because we don't have those visuals for the big kids during the story time. Do the younger kids have a story card, like a picture? No. No,
You
not
want to
really.
out sometimes in the folder that gives the picture or with the story.
With the story there is sometimes. Okay, so then look in that file folder and see. For the big kids, we don't have it. And that is something that I would love to hear back from you guys about. Would it be helpful to have like a picture card that has the story written on the back? Yeah. Some people are saying yes. Okay. I know for me, I have done a lot of different curriculums. I've taught a lot of different trainings, and I felt like that was really helpful. So I might talk with Jeff and Liz and see
Yeah, we'll get
if we
attention more
can
than just-
order picture cards for our next set of books and see if that would help. Angie.
Sometimes a coloring page actually is a picture that goes with the story. So I mean, you could color that page and show that,
Mhm.
show that to them.
Yeah,
so.
And for the big kids, it used to be, we switched to using like the middle kids activities and stuff because we had more middles come in. But it used to be for the big kids, the handout would fold in half and half was, but it was such a tiny, it was like this big, so it's just a little tiny picture like that at the top and the front was a picture. But I'll ask and see, because I do feel like that is helpful, especially for new teachers that are just like starting out with doing children's ministry. How many of you have done children's ministry for less than 5 years?
At this church or ever?
Ever? Less than 5 years. Okay, so we have about half of our group who has been teaching for less than 5 years. Okay, I'm gonna see if maybe we can get those, because I do feel like that is helpful, because then you have something that they're looking at, and also it helps you because then the words are there on the back. And so as they're seeing the picture on the front, like you're seeing your words on the back, and you probably never really want to just like read the words off of the card and do it like this, because then you're breaking your eye contact. But if you have read that, you know, every day of the week, or if you have like a good grasp of what that story is and how it's broken down, like then you can like glance at where you are in the story and make sure you don't miss something that is a major thing. Or if there's something specific that you want to say a certain way, just like highlight it, right? And then you have it right there, and you can quick look at that and read that line or verse. Does that make sense? So okay, I'll talk to our children's ministry team about things.
And then this is like semi-related, but I feel like in the little kids' room, you know, we have like a process of cleaning up the toys and then doing story time and snacks. But I feel like with the babies, like maybe they can like have a separate section with toys. It's like impossible to
Yeah,
keep
like
like,
toys and
yeah,
kids.
it's kind of impossible to keep like the little ones from
Mhm.
ever sitting and just listen, and then just, they're
Yeah.
not there yet.
So your 2s and 3s and 4s are should be able to sit and listen, even if they're eating snack or whatever while they're doing it. But for your babies that are like 1 and under,
I feel like they
you
need
are
some-
right. And so we have in the past with that preschool class, we have had sometimes where we have babies and we have them in a separate little section
Okay.
so that they are not like disrupting what's going on with the teaching. And that's totally fine. Yeah, please feel like you could do that because the little ones that are like 0 to 18 months, they just don't have they're not developed enough to have the capacity to like sit and listen to a story. And they also probably are not eating the snack yet either. So they have their own little whatever snack that they brought, a little pouch or whatever. But yeah, totally. Yeah, don't feel bad about that. Are there any other questions about like the actual teaching time? Like of the story? No? Okay. And so that one would be of our 3, auditory, visual, or tactile. What do you guys think? Auditory. So as we are going down our list here, we had a lot of things in the beginning that were visual and tactile. And when you get to the story, that one is the way that we have been doing it now because we don't have picture cards. That one is really an auditory learning time. So you want to make sure that you have some things that are visual and some things that are tactile before you get to that auditory learning, because then you'll have a better attention span. If you have been doing like auditory stuff the whole time leading up to your lesson, then your lesson 2, it becomes long for some of those kids that are more visual or more tactile. So that can help too with the attention span, is having some of those activities before you have your focused auditory time. All right, Christ connection. Now, the Christ connection is always like just a little blurb under your next section, which is and under your story section. So you have your no one is like God, and that is, I'm not going to go through that whole story, what that is for this week, but then you have a little bit of a review. You can ask the kids some review questions, but then you have this Christ connection. And this one is really great for connecting, especially as we're going through the Old Testament, connecting that with Christ in the New Testament. And so it's just a super quick little blurb that they want you to remember to tell the kids. And so so that is in there, and I kind of combined that with sometimes in your lesson you're going to have a lesson that leads to spelling out the gospel. And so this lesson on holiness was one of those that led to spelling out the gospel. And so that is actually under our Christ connection. It says, use scripture and the guide provided to explain how to become a Christian. Make sure kids know when and where they can ask questions. Right? So in our lesson, as the last page, we have this the gospel plan. And this is also one of the principles. Like when you have that booklet of the kids' printables that you're passing out like 1 page a week, either the front or the back is a colored version of this page. All right. And so you can just pull one from the bin and have a colored version of this. But also sometimes if I have the time, if this is something that like, okay, this ties super into our lesson, then I will just draw these on our board. Okay, I'll draw a crown. All right, we have a crown here. Does anybody remember what part of the gospel this reminds us of? God rules. All right, and then we're gonna talk about something here that's in the ask section. All right, and they also have a verse. So you could do it like one time when I did this, I had 5 different kids, like each look up a verse. And we read a verse about, and that's what went with the picture. Sometimes it was the God rules and we just summarize it. But as you're teaching, this is not something that we give them every single week. But as you see, like the gospel is directly tied into this lesson, like be want to make sure that sometimes we're pulling it in, all right? Because as the kids are growing, they're hearing so much and they're internalizing so much. But there's a moment in time where all of a sudden they're like, oh my gosh, this applies to me, you know? And we want to make sure that we are offering that opportunity as it comes up for them to put those things together, you know? And it's not gonna be every week that happens, but we wanna make sure that on a regular basis, our kids are getting a gospel invitation, like, here is how we respond. And have you ever done that? And then you'll have some kids like, oh yeah, I did that. And maybe one of them wants to say when they did that, when they prayed and asked God to forgive their sins and to be their savior. And you might have someone there that is like, I never did that. And you can ask them, if that's something that you want, here's how I handle it, because I don't want to ever make a child feel like I'm pushing them to make this decision. Like if they make this decision, they're gonna make me happy, or they're gonna make their pastor happy, or their parents, or whatever. So what I will say is, you know what, if this is something that you want to do, come and find me afterwards. I'm super happy to talk to you about it. Or you can talk to your mom and dad and tell them, like, hey, I want to do this. And so that gives the child an opportunity to make a decision if they're ready to do that, but also not to feel like it's being a pressure decision, you know, because we don't just want like a name to get written down on paper and, you know, oh, this, you know, child, like, God saved, they like trust the Lord. We want that to happen, yes, but we want it to be real and genuine. Like it's not something that they're being pressured to do either. So, okay. So there's our 5 points to the gospel and how we can find that. It's always available in the bin all the time. All right, so going down our list, was that auditory or visual or tactile? What do you guys think? Yeah, so we want to use the pictures for our visual learners, whether you're drawing the pictures on the board or whether you're just showing the printable, but then that gets to connect it for our visual learners. All right, missions moment. How many of you guys have taught already in September? September. Okay, so September, we started doing this a little bit differently because we want to be connected to missionaries that our church is actually connected with, right? So in September, we started putting a section into the bin, in that little like zip expandable folder of what missionary we're currently talking about, and we'll talk about them for a whole month. So if you're the first week of September, you're introducing it, or the first week of the month, you're introducing a new missionary. And then Liz has some printable stuff in there. She also has a map that's laminated, so you can look at it and say, okay, who knows where the country of Jordan is? And then they can actually see on the map, okay, here's where they are, here's where we are. And so we have just a few minutes to talk about our missionaries and pray for them. Before we go on to our next thing. So that one would be visual, auditory, or tactile. Another visual one, and also auditory too, as we're talking about them. All right, our key passage activity. Okay, so I have 2 tables. Hi guys, I have 2 puzzles for you guys. So everybody come and put your puzzle together. Yeah. Stand up for this part.
I'm really bad. Adrian's really good, I'm really bad. My shape.
We won. You guys like exactly the same. Alright, so it's a super easy, like I just cut apart 2 pieces of construction paper. Okay, in my classroom, actually, what I would probably do is take my tape, and then before the kids get there, tape these pieces like underneath the tables or under chairs or like in little areas. If you have masking tape or painter's tape, then it's not going to take off the paint, so that we are taking good care of the Eagle Club. But hide them somewhere before the kids get in. and then split my kids into 2 teams and have each team find one color. Like you're looking for all the reds, you guys are looking for all the yellows. So they're first, like they're getting out and about and like they're looking and they're putting it together. All right, so visual, tactile, or auditory? Okay, great. And then after we get it together, okay, so we're gonna say this verse 6 times, and by the end you're gonna have it memorized. Okay, so somebody in your group needs to turn over a piece of the puzzle. Now, somebody from each group is gonna turn over a piece of the puzzle. It doesn't matter what piece gets turned over. Okay, so somebody picks a piece, you turn it over. Okay, now we're reading it again. Who is like you, O Lord? And then they have to remember among the gods, or whatever it was. Who is like you, majestic in holiness, awesome in glorious deeds, doing wonders, Exodus 15:11. Okay, so we are gonna turn over another piece, okay, and say it again, turn over another piece and say it again until all the pieces are turned over. And then by the end, it's so, they learn the verses so fast. So by the end, everybody can say it without looking. And so they're hiding that piece of God's word into their hearts. Like, I know as a kid, I would like have a memory verse that I had to come back and say the next week. And that's great. Like you can ask them, hey, does anybody know their memory verse before you get started? Some of them might, because we do ours for 4 weeks. But the more that we do these tactile things or auditory or visual activities that go along with the verse, the better that word of the Lord gets hidden into their hearts. And so that is going to stay with them forever. All right. So yeah, I really like cannot stress like make the verse fun and interesting.
Verse usually the key passage activity. Is that
That's the key passage activity. It's a memory verse. Yeah. So it's always a memory verse. So and they have in our book every week they have a different activity for you to do. So some of them are going to be more like, you know, you're going to relate to more because it's more towards your learning style. But some of them you might not relate to as well, but you might have kids that are like, that really helped. So that's our key passage activity for this particular lesson. And we can see we used all of those as we did it because we started out with a tactile activity, but then we incorporated the visual and the auditory too. So Bible skills or group discussion. In this particular lesson, if you're looking on our next section, they do give you options for both of those. And because of our time constraints, we almost never have time to do both of those things. But they do always have a group discussion in there, and they do always have a Bible skills in there. If you look at the Bible skills for the week and you're like, oh, this is such a great activity, I really want my kids to do this, send a text message to the moms and be like, hey, have your kids bring their Bibles. And that brings more Bibles into the class because some of them like don't typically bring their Bibles and others like bring it every week. So so you can do that. And then group discussion. Has anybody ever gone through the group discussion questions? No? I have done it a couple of times. And when I'm doing that, like I give them a chance to put the 2 tables together and we make a circle. Or maybe for some reason I have had them do the story time in the circle. Sometimes I'll move our room arrangement around in the middle of a lesson, and the kids like helping to do that, and it also gets them up and gets them like moving a little bit. And then when we sit back down to whatever it is that we've rearranged, then that is a kind of like a fresh start. It's like that reset. Like, okay, now we're in this special mode, and here's what we're gonna do. So I have done some of these good discussion questions, and when you are constantly telling, like, okay, they're gonna remember some of it, but when you ask questions, that's when they have to like think about how it relates to them in their life. And it's amazing to see, like, even at such a young age, like how they start incorporating these things into that's how that would work. Oh, this is a person that needs to hear this message that I have been internalizing. So, you know, if you have the time to work that into one of your lessons, don't be afraid of it. Like sometimes I feel like, you're that is out, like the kids could be out of control because then you're asking for a lot of their input instead of like, having it controlled. But actually, like it is an opportunity for them to make all those connections in a different way than they're usually doing. And because it's not something that we do every single week, like it doesn't become a circus, like they're not used to it, right? And sometimes when we do something that the kids are not used to doing, it actually holds their attention better than something that they do every single week. So don't be afraid of that. Like if you come to the discussion questions and you're like, oh, these are good, like these are like just what our kids need to hear, have a discussion. It's okay to like to not be in control of how the answers come out, because that's part of the experience of learning and internalizing. So, and then we often have an activity at the end. This particular lesson, it was a live the mission activity. So we had two options again. We have option 1, living on a mission, and it's a skit. And then option 2, it doesn't fit. And so if I was going to do one of these options as I'm teaching, the option it doesn't fit, that's going to require a little bit more prep, but not a lot. You could do this by just taking a blank sheet of paper and writing those 4 things. So for our it doesn't fit, you're going to have sets. So the first set is a quarter, a snake, a hammer, a cat. So you just write those 4 things, a quarter, a snake, a hammer, a cat, on one paper. And you could put 4 stations in your room and break your group into 4 teams. And each team goes to a station and they get 1 minute on your timer to see if they can figure out what it is that doesn't fit. Okay, don't tell the other teams, okay? Don't tell the other teams. You want to make sure your team has the most and don't give away the answers, right? Okay. And then after a minute, they switch. 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 Now that they've had some time to like get up and move around and interact, some kids are that is going to really help them to then refocus afterwards, okay? Even though it seems for us sometimes like, this is a little chaotic and, I don't know about this. But that opportunity sometimes can be really good at the end. When we're telling all the answers, they want to hear the answers, all right? So then we have them sit back down. All right, we're going to talk about those answers. What did your group get for this? What did your group get for this? But make sure that you remember how to tie that back in to what we learned about in our lesson, because that is the hard part for us. Like we get the kids, we make sure that we have their attention, we get them, to do an activity. But then how does that activity tie in with what we just talked about God being holy, about holiness, meaning set apart. And then when we, look at it, sin separates us from God. And that's what is different between us and God, is that we are sinful, right? So you're tying in, how does this relate to our lesson? Okay. But then again, you have 2 different activities and you can choose. Like, look at your list. What did you choose for your first activity? Was it tactile, visual, or auditory? Maybe you want to choose the opposite for this one. So your it doesn't fit is definitely going to be auditory, right? And maybe visual too, because you're looking at it. And if you are having them go around the room, then there's a tactile element that some kids are going to remember things better because they moved around the room, or because they were grouped in a group with other kids and they remember who's in their group. All right, for our living on a mission, these kids are going to be making a skit. So that one for sure is going to be tactile, because you have, up and moving and creating a skit and acting it out for everybody. The skits sometimes can be pretty funny when we do this. So you're going to pick one or the other of those. And then at the end, they always have some reflection questions. And this honestly gets cut out so many times because we just don't have the time to get all of these activities in. And when you are teaching, you're going to pick and choose the activities that you're really comfortable with leading. Somebody else is going to pick different activities than you did because they have lots of different learning styles in this room. All of them are represented. So as you come and make your list and figure out, like, what are we doing and how is that going to capture my audience, you can also pick and choose too, like, based on what you're gonna be comfortable leading, all right? And know that somebody else is gonna be comfortable leading other types of things. So, so that wraps up a little bit on doing our lesson framework. I have lesson frameworks for all of you to take home that are blank. And then use this how you want. Like if you want, like I can send you the Google Doc file of it. I can post it into the children's ministry, and I'll do that. I'll post it to the children's ministry page. But you know, use it how you want. Like if you want to have a clipboard and carry like a full page around, great. If you want to just put it on a little index card and have something like that, great. But it just gives you a tool to kind of have in your toolbox so that it makes the lesson time go a little bit more smoothly and the pastor can go a little more smoothly. We're gonna open it up for some Q&A. So I am gonna just pass these to tables and let Jason come on back up here and